So welcome everybody to another fine edition of Book Chat. I'm Patricia Dubroof and I'm the Director of Community Relations for Assisting Hands Home Care in Potomac, Maryland, where we serve families with our fabulous CNAs and our amazing nurses who support them and train them and keep our families so happy. It's a very good thing to do. There's so many people who need support, and it's great to be able to provide caring, loving support on a daily basis. If you want to talk to me more about home care, get the Home Care 101 conversation going with me, call me anytime, and we'd be happy to help. One of the reasons that we do Book Chat and What's Your Plan and Death Cafe is because we feel it's really important to educate our families in things beyond home care, but in ways that might help them eventually with their home care needs. And today we have a very special guest who is coming to us from far, far away in Washington State, Traci Cram Perkins, and she has experienced many, many roles as a caregiver for many family members. And she decided to write a book about it so that all of us could gain knowledge from what she experimented with. And believe me, I've read a lot of books about dementia care, but nobody has written it with such delight, room for laughing, room for making mistakes, explaining the details, and large enough print that I didn't have to, squint. So it's got a lot of information. It's a dense book, but it's also super, super helpful. And I'm so glad to see our nurse, Jeanette Hand, is online, because I think this may be like part of what we want to roll into our training for CNAs who are working specifically with folks with dementia. So welcome, Traci. You weren't always a caregiver, were you?
Well, thank you for having me. And no, I wasn't always a caregiver. I was more of a daughter or a friend or a coworker, and I had never had any experience with caring for anybody or understanding age or aging or anything associated with aging. So for me, it was I fell into it feet first, from the fire into the frying pan, so to speak.
And
Like
what
many
were you
people.
doing with all your time before you were a caregiver?
My husband and I had a small business where we are manufacturers representative, and so we were working in the electrical industry, and so I had nothing in common with working in healthcare.
I wanted to emphasize that because I think so many times, we jump from something completely yin to something completely yang. And I think in this case, Traci, you have found a calling. I'm certain of it, but hopefully you won't have too many more relatives who rely on you. You can just relax a little bit.
Hopefully not.
I also know that you're in the midst of caring for yet another family member. So if you need to pause or whatever, we understand.
Oh, thank you.
But let's start off talking about how this came upon you. And I think a lovely way to start is if you want to just read your what's it called? Like the benediction.
Oh, the dedication?
The
Sure.
dedication, thank you. From your book.
Certainly. So this book is dedicated to my father, Eldon, who taught me how to rebuild my first car, who taught me how to fish, who could never convince me that vanilla ice cream was the ultimate flavor because you secretly love strawberry, and who continued to teach me up to the very end. Thank you for the time you spent with me and asking the question, I have Alzheimer's disease, not the plague. What does it take to be treated like a human being?
Hmm. So I see some nodding heads. That really resonates. So you can already tell from this dedication that there's going to be humor and there's going to be reality checks, and it's not going to, she's not going to hold back. So how did this first start?
Well, it first started when I got a panicked phone call from my younger sister saying she found our dad unconscious in his apartment. And when he came to in the hospital, he was diagnosed with moderate Alzheimer's disease. Because he lived alone and I did not have power of attorney, they would not release him to my care, and they ended up shuffling him in the system because he wanted to go for walks and he was still ambulatory and fairly healthy. He knew he didn't belong there, so he would act out, and part of his acting out was wandering. And so he wanted to go for a walk and he would escape from facilities. And he would do about 5 escapes before a social services would be called in and they would move him to another facility. So over a 4-month period, he was moved to 5 different facilities. And those of you who have done dementia care know that it takes 6 months or longer for somebody to feel safe in their environment. So he was getting more and more upset. They were putting him on more and more medications. So by the time they got to the most secure facility, he was on 22 medications to make him calm. Every single one of them was having a drug interaction, so he was hyperactive, and it sent his diabetes so far out of control, he should have been dead. He was having blood sugars over the 500 level. So by the time he got to the 5th and most secure facility, they called me 2 days before Christmas and said, we can't take him anymore. You have 5 days to find some place for him to stay. In that 5 days, I was able to get power of attorney. We canceled Christmas, and unfortunately, we were the ones that were hosting. And we did everything we could think of that might make a home dementia friendly, which wasn't. And then we were able to, on the 28th of December, bring him home to our house. That's when he asked me the question about the Alzheimer's disease. And I also want to point out, he came from an 80-degree facility. Here in Washington State, it was 2 days after Christmas, 3 days after Christmas. It was 28 degrees outside, and our house was at 68. By the time he went to bed, he had hypothermia, and he was telling me that something was wrong, but he couldn't tell me what it was. And I didn't know other than to check his blood sugar, his pulse, and his blood pressure, anything else about how to check to see if he was having a problem. And I had to call 911. So that's how I got my introduction into dementia care.
Wow. Brave woman. That's all I can say. So it went downhill before it went uphill for sure.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I made every mistake you could imagine just because I didn't know.
Yeah. And now, so fast forward like a few weeks and you've learned a lot more about what your dad's able or not able to do.
Mhm.
We all know with Alzheimer's disease and actually with just naturally occurring dementia, that there are plateaus and there are stairs. And you can have a loved one at a plateau for months, for years, and then wake up the next morning and they've got antlers. I mean, they step down and they are a different person. They are, something significant has changed, or you might see little baby steps going down. But we know the trajectory is a downhill, and that's hard to live with. So what did you do? What was your secret sauce that made it possible for you and your husband to take on this big responsibility?
Well, part of what we did is I knew I needed help, and I started asking everybody I knew that had any experience with it. And I also was very fortunate that I had friends that had gone into medicine. And one of them was a dietitian who told me that to have the pharmacist do a drug interaction check. So we ended up taking him, like I said, off of 22 medications. When I got the blister packs from the last nursing facility, they gave me 38 blister packs plus his diabetes medication. So 22 of those went away. And within a few days, he popped back as if I'd put him on fertilizer and he was a flower. I mean, he literally came back. But he also was so unsettled, he tried to commit suicide. We had to deal with that. He also didn't believe he was going to get to stay with us. So he refused to go to his bedroom because he thought he was going to be taped down, which is what happened at one of the Jerry psych wards he was sent to. And so we had to convince him that it was safe. And whenever he would get afraid in the middle of the night, and all of you have experienced this, perhaps he would come to our bedroom door and call my name every few minutes. And I would have to get up, help him with something, and then get him calmed down. And once I thought he was okay, I would go back to bed. 5 to 10 minutes later, the same thing would happen. And this went on for 6 months. After 6 months, he finally calmed down, went and actually used his bedroom, slept in his bed. And we started a routine where he was actually starting to feel safe. And then he would shadow me everywhere just because he didn't know what he was supposed to do. And I'm sure some of you have experienced shadowing. And so then when he would start repeating things that I was doing, I was getting frustrated because I was like, okay, why are we doing this? And I didn't know about shadowing at the time.
Yeah, those are challenging things.
Mhm.
And, just to skip around a little bit in your book, I forget how many chapters I think you have like
22.
20 some chapters,
Mhm.
and and then she has a huge, useful websites in the back and appendixes. And I mean, it's very, uh, organized and easy to read. But there's a whole section in here, you talked about meeting a nutritionist. There's a whole section in here about meal planning
Mhm.
and what kind of recipes and how to make recipes that would appeal to your loved one, knowing that their taste buds probably have changed. We were just talking about that with a client of mine today, that her mom and dad are eating such bland food, and she's like, oh, but I want to cook them something that they always loved. And I was like, well, now this is what they love. Get
Mhm.
with their program. And I think that's a lot of what, you refer to, is figuring out what gives your loved one pleasure instead of how it makes you feel. So if dad doesn't want to eat eggs anymore for breakfast, that's okay. It's back to us. How can we make it better for them? And I think your secret sauce is your sense of humor,
Oh, thank you.
because everything that I've read and that you've told me about comes with that little bit of, if you laugh about this, it's going to feel a whole lot better than if you get frustrated with it. So mom's got her pink shirt on and her bright purple pants, and she's got her underwear on top. What are you going to do? What's the point of getting upset? She got herself dressed. Hallelujah.
It's a rock star day. We developed my dad and I a routine where if I wanted to get him to bathe or change clothes, because I should back this up with a quick story. He was an escape artist, and whenever anything went out of sync, that was his first thing to do, was wander, until we were able to take care of that. So what we did, and I got the idea from Jolene Brackey's book, Creating Moments of Joy Along the Alzheimer's Journey, and then I took it and made it my own. In the evening time, we would wrap a present that would be for a friend, and I would put in it his favorite clean clothes, and then a gift card from a family member who I had people write all sorts of gift cards for me so I could just rotate them. And then I would ask him to wrap it in the evening. When we wrapped this, then he was all excited that he was helping me to help a friend. And then I would put it away and he would forget about it. Of course, he resets overnight. After breakfast, I would throw that on his pillow, and then he would come in and he would find it. He'd be so excited. Now, part of this also was because the first time he escaped, he was wearing the same clothes for 3 days and I could not tell you what he was wearing. I had no clue. And I went on the Alzheimer's Association's website and found out that I needed to take a daily photo. So what I did is we would have him pose in his new clothes after he'd bathed to show everybody how happy he was with his clothes so that I could send them a picture. And then I had my daily photo. So it was just something that we did to try and, create a whole bunch of things together. But every time he did that, he had such a good day. And so we had a lot of fun. And then at lunchtime, he and I would play cards. He had his favorite card game we played, and it would tell me what kind of an evening we were going to have. So I was able to use that as a litmus test to find out if we were going to have a tough evening and he was going to have lots of behavior issues, or if we were just going to have a great evening and sail through.
Wow. Wow. So let's go back to the book for a second, and
Sure.
I'm going to ask you to indulge us and read that first, introduction in chapter 1, just because I think it's important to hear what the author has to in their own voice, but it's also, I think it gives everybody a great opportunity to learn sort of what's inside the book.
Thank you. We all look for quick answers and shortcuts, especially when we are under great stress. This book is for anyone who is struggling to care for someone with dementia. It contains the "What can I try in this moment" tips you can use whether you are caring for a family member or a friend. Each person's journey is different. The road to dementia will take, well, excuse me, the road to, I can't even speak English today. The road of dementia care will change every aspect of your life and theirs. Dementia is like playing hide and seek. Ready or not, here I come. None of us saw dementia barreling down the road at us like a Mack truck with no brakes, because it arrives slowly with possible explanations for everything. Only when we look back do we see the mounting evidence. No two people with dementia are the same. No two family members will care for a loved one with dementia the same way. Caring for someone with dementia is one of the most stressful burdens a person can ever accept. We have more training to drive a car, operate a smartphone, or boil water than we do to care for someone who is saying the long goodbye. Unlike a day job, with dementia care, there are no vacations, no pay raises, no glowing performance reviews. Unlike raising a child, there is no first day of kindergarten, no graduations, and no weddings to look forward to. My journey started with my younger sister when she called me to tell me our father reached his tipping point and didn't have the health to continue caring for our mother. Our mother had cancer and the treatment caused her dementia. My husband and I decided I would quit my job and take over my mother's care. What I didn't know then was that my father already traveled down the road to Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is a great mimic, disguising itself as anything else, even from the person who has the disease. I hadn't discovered he had it for several more years. I wasn't a caregiver. I didn't know the first thing about caregiving, and I didn't have any medical training. I did know I need lots of help, and that's it.
So this book really came from this in I'm going to say it like a calling that you have for helping other people. You are a huge empath, and I applaud you many circles around for that. So how did you actually decide that you were going to write about this? I mean, you were experiencing it and you were doing something to offset the experiencing, something for yourself. Did it have to do with writing or journaling, or tell us about that aspect?
Okay, well, I have been a writer my whole life, so not an author, but just a writer where I would write and journal and do things like that. But when my father started having all these problems, and I was searching books everywhere trying to find what I needed, I then needed to figure out a way to keep it all in one place, because if you have somebody melting down and they're throwing their fork and their spoon and their knife and their plate at you because something is not going right, and all you're doing is ducking and you don't know how to get them from angry to calm, you need all the tools you can get. So I was documenting everything I could to try and keep a roadmap of what worked and what didn't. And then of course I was asking everybody, and then I was writing everything down. And then before my dad actually lost his memory of us and of me and stuff, he said, Traci, you have to write these down and share these with people. So, he gave me permission to share it with everybody else. And then it took 7.5 years from that point to get to where to the book, basically.
Yeah. Well, not unusual to spend 5 years writing a very intense book, but you at the same time were also caregiving. So did this book give you some healing feeling as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Self-care?
Yeah, because it is so draining. I can remember when my dad, when his health problems got so bad that we could no longer take care of him and he had to go into skilled care. The next morning after we had delivered him to skilled care, my husband and I sat in the living room, no sounds on in the house. We stared at the ceiling and all we did was listen to the furnace for an hour before work. And we couldn't do anything else. We were lost. We just didn't know what we were doing. We'd been going 24/7 for days on end for years. And suddenly it wasn't there. And it was like this huge gap and we weren't sure what to do. It took us a full year to figure out what to do. I mean, it took us that long to just heal enough to understand, okay, it's taken a different turn. And he hadn't passed at that point, but it was like, what do we do with ourselves?
Yeah. Well, I know the euphoria that some families feel when they do actually it comes to that point where they have to place their family in a skilled nursing facility, and then they have their days and nights back and they're sleeping.
Mhm.
And it's like, wow, I didn't realize I was missing this. So I Totally appreciate that. And then how soon after that did your next family member need you?
I was actually doing simultaneous care for my uncle. At the same time I was taking care of my dad. My uncle lived on his own. So my dad shadowed me. He went with me everywhere. He was my buddy. So there was no place I went that he didn't go, except for I got some respite on Saturday mornings to go running and talking to my girlfriends. And so that was the schedule we had. And so the rest of the week he would go with me. I would take my uncle to doctor's appointments. I was learning how to deal with other health issues beyond what just was in dementia. Then my uncle did get dementia through his journey with diabetes, which is also the route that my dad had taken. And so I was learning more in that regards about what I needed to do, how to take care of him, how to operate a wheelchair, just anything that I knew absolutely nothing about. I was learning on the fly. But he and my uncle died 6 months after my father. So we just had kind of a road together. We did everything together, and I was juggling my dad and my uncle at the same time. And then I had a short break before my aunt started going downhill.
Wow. It's a big responsibility you've taken on. Oh my goodness. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the other expert advice you have in your book. So of the 20 some chapters, I'm just going to rattle off a few pieces that I thought were particularly of interest. Besides going through, well, my favorite is the power of laughter from the caregiver's perspective and how to use that. We talked about that. What is dementia and Alzheimer's? I think that's great. You did a good job, making that clear. And then, everybody always asks about the driving question, like how do you get somebody to not use their car anymore? Memory aids and the family, and let's talk about the 5 magic words.
The 5 magic words. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with Teepa Snow, she came up with this program to be able to figure out what it is you're talking to somebody about. And the 5 magic words are, well, here, let me read it right out of the book and I can tell you exactly the 5 magic words since
36.
Page 30. Oh, perfect. Okay. Hang on here. I apologize that I'm not
You didn't
prepared.
rehearse, this is all ad hoc.
So the first part of the 5 magic words are tell me more about, and then insert the thing. So one time my father told me, we were in the car driving and he said, can you tell me when the jet is landing? Wasn't sure what that was all about. So could you tell me more about the jet? Turned out it was how long we were driving in the car. But you can also say, can you describe the jet for me? So or can you point to it? Can you show me what it looks like in case it's something? And some of the things that I also did was now this is available now, it wasn't at the time. We created little cards that we used where I had pictograms on it. So if he was thirsty or hungry, he could point to the picture for me if I wasn't understanding what he was telling me.
That's great.
But now they have those cards available so you can actually use them.
So don't hesitate to get more information is basically your recommendation.
Oh, absolutely.
Instead of challenging, ask more. Tell
Yeah.
me more.
Definitely tell you more. You've got an adult, as all of you know, we want to be treated respectfully. And my dad was lost at sea and he had no hope of ever getting back to shore. And I was his anchor. And so I just had to figure out how am I going to get him back to some form of stability. And so we just kept working at it and trying to find the right mix that would help us get there. And sometimes it was like just asking questions. He also loved to go out and chop all the garden down. So after a point, I just let him. It was this great exercise. And so he chopped the whole garden up.
That's great. Look at that little cutie on our camera. Carol's got a grandchild with her, I think. That's so fun. So I want to give time for people to ask questions, and we're coming up to the top of the hour. But I'm going to share my screen again. So if you do want to get in touch or want to pick up one of these great books, it's easy to do. Let me just get to the right slide. There you go. That should work. There. And does anybody have a question they'd like to ask out loud, or do you want to put something in chat? Feel free.
Well, I have a question.
Okay, great. Come on in.
How would you advise a caregiver who's got a client that is currently refusing any kind of care? She doesn't want her anywhere near her. She's not letting her get cleaned in a very personal way. What kinds of advice would you give to that person?
Okay, first of all, I would ask, what is the relationship between that provider and the person and how are they speaking to each other? I mean, because usually when you're getting that kind of a pushback, in my limited experience, it's been because the person doesn't feel like they're being treated respectfully, or the body language of the caregiver is intimidating them. So that might be my first question, is to see what's going on between the two of them. I can understand the private parts. There are other ways of doing it, such as getting a bidet attachment to a toilet so that they can actually just rinse themselves off to keep that clean, or using a sitz bath on the toilet. But also the modesty issue might be another problem. If they have access to like maybe dignity wear so that they can cover up the private parts, and then you just work your way through to cleaning them underneath whatever the covering is. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there's a bunch of stories in the book about how different ways to approach the showering. And as Traci described for her own dad, she had to lure him in with a present every time. So that seems like a great plan if you have time and attention for it. It may not work in the professional caregiver who's got 5 hours and they've got to be in and out and have this many things done. But I definitely think that coming up with a strategy for that particular client is the key. And what is it that they like to do? Maybe, and in some cases, we know this, that people feel threatened by showers, that they're not good places to be in, especially if they're all white. If there's a mix of color, that sort of calms them down a little bit, but if they're just a white void, they can't see the edges and it makes them very nervous. So as a chair to sit in, a shower chair. Margie, did you have a question too?
Not a question, but just a comment to thank you, Traci, for sharing that, because so many of us have been in that situation. I cared for my mom and stepfather in both times for different reasons. And what we had was giggle time. So I absolutely, agree with you with humor. My mom and I giggled on really absurd things. But we were able to kind of twist it around to something that was maybe very unpleasant. And we just got into a giggle. And that really made it a lot better. So thank you for writing this and sharing it. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Margie. And Carol's got her hand up, so I think it's
now
working.
I do. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Traci. I've learned so much already. I'm caring for my 99-year-old mom in dementia, and hallucinations are really hard. And do you have any tips on how to handle them?
Yes. Oh, hallucinations. We've had quite a few in our house. Walking her through to a place of safety is the best chance you have of getting her through that hallucination. Is she seeing critters, or is she talking to people? Is there a specific
She-
style?
She's talking to people. She thinks people are here.
Okay.
Sometimes there are little girls that she sees and she talks to them. Sometimes people get in bed with her and she's afraid and she wants to jump out of the bed because somebody's in the bed with her. So it's all different kinds of hallucinations.
Okay. One of the things that we did with my father was we acknowledge the fact that we could not see the person that they could see, but we understood she sees them, and that she needs to tell you where they are located, and that you understand she's afraid and you will stay with her until she's calm. You may have to move her out of the room to do that. You might be able to do it while you're in the room. Again, using humor, if you can get her to that place, holding her hand. Teepa Snow has a really great thing for talking people down from agitation. So you might want to look her up and see for the 10 steps of reducing agitation. Just type in her name in the 10 steps for reducing agitation. You should be able to find her. She's got a
What
video
was
where she
that-
walks through it.
What was
Teepa
that name?
Snow. It's Teepa is the first name. It's Teepa is her first name.
Okay.
Last name is Snow.
Well,
Yeah, like
okay.
definitely look her up. She is amazing for teaching people how to work with people with dementia. She has videos that she does on Facebook almost every morning. So you might want to look up and see what topics she's got. You can scroll through them. She might be able to walk you through how to walk her down a hallucination and get her to a place of calm.
Perfect. One of the things that I find that works is like she'll see my great grandmother, her grandmother, and I'll say, geez, Mom, you can see her, and I wish I could see her. I miss her too. And and I do things like that with her. I'm saying you have a special gift. You can see people who are on the other side, and I wish I could do that. And she goes calm with that. She likes being acknowledged that it is real for her.
Yeah.
That's the point. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an emphasizer for all kinds of situations, is just acknowledging what they want or what they see, because it doesn't really matter to you. I mean, it's okay if she calls a carrot a banana. Who cares? It's a giggle moment, right, Margie? Like, yeah, that's a banana, that's a carrot. I mean, what do we care? It doesn't change how she feels about it, but it might help her feel less thwarted. So that's really important. Anybody else want to jump in? Questions, concerns? I think there's way more than a half hour's worth of information in Traci's book, but I am thrilled that you came on to give us just a little taste of it. And I hope that for those of you who want to read it, it's called Dementia Home Care: How to Prepare Before, During, and After. And thank you all for being here and for caring for loved ones, because it's a huge job. And give yourselves a hug.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank
All
you.
right.